Welcome back to iGen Politics. This is a podcast that makes politics engaging and relevant for all generations. My name is Victor Shi. I'm a sophomore at UCLA, the youngest elected delegate for Joe Biden, and one of the co-hosts of this podcast.
I'm Jill Wine-Banks, the author of The Watergate Girl, based on my experience as the only female prosecutor in the Watergate case. I'm also an MSNBC legal analyst and the wearer of Jill's pins. And today's pin is a special one for our guest, Paula Poundstone. It's the comedy and drama symbols. And that's because our guest today will surely make you laugh. She is a popular panelist and one of my favorite panelists on NPR's weekly clever and funny news quiz, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. It's broadcast from Victor's and my hometown, Chicago, and Paula tours regularly in addition to that show, performing stand-up throughout the country. She was the first woman ever to share the stage with the president at the White House Correspondents Dinner as the host and comic. She also has held numerous HBO specials, starred in her own series on HBO and ABC, is included in Comedy Central's list of top 100 comics of all time, and has won the American Comedy Award. The national spokesman for the American Library Association is also Paula Poundstone, so we'll talk about that as well as many other things. She's also written 2 books, There's Nothing in This Book That I Meant to Say, and The Totally Unscientific Study of the Search for Happiness. So let's welcome Paula. We're very grateful to have you with us today, Paula. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to get to talk to you.
Likewise. So I am fascinated by your life. Your mom was a housewife and your dad was an engineer, and you began doing stand-up comedy at open mic nights in Boston at 20 years old in 1979 and traveled around the country via Greyhound. Were you always interested in comedy?
The first sentence of the last paragraph of the summary letter written by my kindergarten teacher, which I believe was written in lieu of a report card. She said, I have enjoyed many of Paula's humorous comments about our activities. And I still have that letter. In fact, now, I don't know where, now it's blown up and framed. I don't quite know where that ended up, but it's somewhere around here. The fact that adults responded to something that I said, like that it made an adult laugh, had such an impact on me. And so, yes, I was always interested in comedy. I don't think I always knew, I didn't know anything about stand-up comedy when I was a kid, because to watch stand-up comedy, I had to watch The Tonight Show. And my parents didn't really enjoy my company enough to have me up that late.
Well, I think I have to ask, what was the commentary about the activities that you did?
I can't even imagine anymore. I mean, it must have been like a type 5 on, I don't know, crayons. I can't remember any longer what I might have said back then. But, I was reunited with Mrs. Bump, I don't know, within the time of my career. She's come to a couple of shows and come to see me. I'm so grateful that, because a year later, the teacher in first grade wrote out, she put the grades on the report card, and then there would be this little inserts that they would put in there with a note, to sort of personalize it. And I still have that too. And it says that I was prone to emotional outbursts. I think it also said that I should be tutored in handwriting, maybe. Which none of those things could you really base a career on.
Well, so it seems like you definitely did have a talent for being funny. At what moment did you realize you wanted to perform in front of an audience? And I guess maybe what was that first performance like for you?
Well, when I was young and I was, sort of fantasizing about it all, I wanted to be Carol Burnett or Lily Tomlin or Mary Tyler Moore or Lucille Ball or Gilda Radner, and I missed all that by a country mile. But I happened to be living in Boston, bussing tables for a living when the stand-up comedy scene there sort of started up. Now, obviously, stand-up has, the idea of somebody standing up and telling jokes has been around since probably we were in the caves. But there was a renewal of interest in that form of entertainment that took place in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was lucky enough to be in that city when that happened.
So my biggest fear about doing comedy is me thinking that I'm funny, but others not thinking the same. Did you feel that way when you first started performing in front of an audience? Because I would find it petrifying.
Yes, but the desire to do it is so strong that you kind of, I think it's probably, I've never given birth before, but I would imagine it's something like that, in that you forget about the painful part. And so you have a tendency, or actually I can say as an addict, you forget about how badly something screwed you up before, and so then you just keep thinking it's a good idea to do it again. That's kind of what stand-up comedy is like.
So I've never wanted to be a comic, and never had much talent for that. But I do know that when I've given speeches and people laugh at the right moment, when
Right.
I say something, it is the most rewarding thing ever. And so going back to your career, in 1984, you had a dramatic breakthrough. One of your performances was noticed by someone with great name recognition, and that's Robin Williams. So can you talk about how you came to have Robin see you perform and what happened as a result of that?
Well, I left Boston on a Greyhound bus in, I don't know, only after about a year of being a stand-up there, to see what clubs were like in different cities. And I would live on the Greyhound. I would buy what was called back then an Ameripass. It was a blank ticket book, essentially, that you could use for 30 days. And so I just lived on the Greyhound bus. And I ended up, I sort of went to all sorts of different cities, and I ended up in San Francisco, which from the minute I stepped off the bus, I've always likened it to Dorothy when she came out of the house after it had landed, and before she had lived in this black and white world, and now there's this, color world. And that was even the bad section of San Francisco. So I ended up doing a set that maybe one or two nights into my stay at a club called the Other Cafe, and I fell in love with the audience there. And so I just sort of stayed. I just left sort of an open-ended trip. And Robin Williams, by that time, was already a big, huge star. He was probably still on Mork and Mindy at that point, maybe. And he was just around. He would come into clubs all the time. So there was nothing really unique about him seeing me in particular. He hung around. The truth is, I firmly believe that every comic my age and younger owes a debt of gratitude to Robin, because part of what pumped up the comedy scene in all these smaller cities than Los Angeles or New York, where there was no comedy scene before that, in the smaller cities, part of what pumped it up was that Robin would show up. When he did a tour, like if he was performing at some 3,000 seat amphitheater in Cleveland, he would show up at Uncle Funny's Yuck House at 1 a.m. after his big, huge Huda Hada show. And so people went out to clubs a lot of times hoping they would see him. And because he was the Tasmanian devil of stand-up comedy, they often did see him. So he befriended me. And at the time he had this, he had a management company that was like a big deal management company in LA, and so did Dana Carvey, and Dana Carvey was my roommate. And so the two of them introduced me to their management. And Robin was always a big supporter. When he hosted Saturday Night Live, he got them to let me come on and do stand-up. And that was, I don't know, mid-'80s maybe. In fact, the truth is, I really wasn't all that good, but it was so much pressure that I caved a little bit. But anyways, he was always a terrific supporter.
That's so wonderful. And obviously, Saturday Night Live must have opened you to a lot of new audiences. It certainly resulted in, not particularly that, but as your career, you won a lot of awards, and including the Best Female Stand-Up Comic. And you became the first woman to win the award for cable excellence, the ACE Award. And you basically were a pioneer in comedy. And you've mentioned some of your role models. Were they the ones who really guided you in terms of following this career path?
Well, I have always wanted to be like a comic actress. And as I say, I missed that by a country mile. I mean, I'm a stand-up comic, and I get to do other little jobs, different kinds of performing here and there. But in the main, you know, if I were to have a gravestone, which I won't, but if I were to write my own epitaph, which I also won't, it would be a little bit like Ben Franklin, I think, in that he made his own epitaph, and he said that he was a printer, and I'm a table busser and a stand-up comic, and the truth is, I'm probably better suited to table bussing. I was unbelievable table busser. Never saw anything like it, but I never got awards for it.
I have a feeling you are underestimating your own skills and talent, because
that's because you haven't seen me bust tables.
Well, that's true. I can't compare it. There's no question. I wonder, has COVID had a big impact on performing? Because there aren't live venues really where people are coming in. Is that making a difference?
Well, yeah. I mean, now I've been back out on the road since June. I'm out for a couple nights on the weekend, and same as I used to be in theaters. The various theaters have modifications due to COVID in different ways. I work some places now where the audience is spaced apart. You can sit with the party that you came in with, but you're 6 feet away from other people. I'm not sure that makes any difference anyways, but that's what they do in some places. And it's the opposite of how one might normally do it, because, if I, and I'm not going to say this has ever happened, but if I was working a theater in the before time, and maybe not as many people as I would like to have been there attended, then I or someone else would go out on stage and say, how about if everybody... there's some empty seats right down front. How about if everybody comes and fills up these seats, and then and the reason people do that is to sort of bundle that energy. And it does make a difference. So now we're doing the opposite in some settings, which is, you don't really know where you're playing to. I play to, and some theaters are streaming now, which even if we ever get COVID under control, and I'm not convinced that we will, but even if we did, they're never going to give up that streaming thing, because it's another, form of income. But during this stay-at-home order, oh my gosh, it was just like for everybody else. It was a lonely, lonely time. And such uncertainty, not knowing about when your income is coming back or if it's coming back. And
I think streaming will go away because we're all getting really tired of Zooming. And
well, that's true. Yeah. That is absolutely true. I did, I performed via Zoom in all sorts of, or I made comedy videos and things during the stay-at-home order. because it was the best I could do in the moment. You cannot do stand-up comedy, however. So I would do characters, or I did a little game show, and mercifully, I do have a podcast. So I did those things to sort of fill in the gaps a little bit. But you can't do stand-up comedy in your living room.
No.
I'll tell you, no. In fact, I'm off and on very jealous of musicians as a performer anyways, because a musician can go on stage and get all sorts of reactions, and they're all considered, successful. It was a successful appearance. Whereas a comic, there's only one reaction you can get, right? If people aren't laughing, guess what? It didn't go very well. So I'm a little jealous of musicians, also because they can go out on stage like before they even begin and go like, "Whoo!" A comic really can't do that.
Yeah.
It's sort of, but when the stay-at-home order hit, musicians were able to like do a little Zoom show from their living room, playing their guitar and singing, and people were like, oh, it's so isn't it? The news hour on PBS, which I watch pretty much every night, I'm telling you, I think it was 2 different stories on Mary Chapin Carpenter singing in her kitchen. I was so jealous. I've come to hate Mary Chapin Carpenter. I don't think she usually elicits this kind of reaction from people, but I'm just pissed at her.
Well, my favorite, that would be the combination of what you're saying, would be Bette Midler, who is a comic but a singer and a dancer. And she's the person I want to be in my next life. I would love to be able to stand up on a stage and dominate it the way she does. But, oh, well, that's not going to happen.
I love the idea. That's like a movie. That's like Heaven Can Wait or something. The idea that you come back as someone else, but there's still a hint of Jill Wine-Banks, and so it's Bette Midler, but wait, Jill Wine-Banks is in there somewhere?
Yeah.
I like that.
I would love that.
I'm sure we would all watch that. Well, I want to get back to your career, Paula, because not only are you a comedian, but you were also a political correspondent for The Tonight Show when Jay Leno was hosting. And when I first read that, I thought of people like Jordan Klepper and like Amber Ruffin. I'm wondering what that entailed for you. Was it like serious news? What was the preparation for a political correspondent on The Tonight Show?
It was so long ago. I'm not sure I remember exactly how I prepared. I think it was my manager's idea. This idea of me doing that. I did the conventions and then I did the inauguration, and it was right after Jay had just gotten the Tonight Show, and it was sort of a lucky thing for me in terms of timing, because honestly, they were still trying to get their sea legs over at their new show, and here I was given this chance to go do something that was very unscripted. And a lot of shows, and one can't really blame them for this, but a lot of shows would want a lot more restraint on the people that were working on their show, whereas they didn't even know where I was going to be when he came to me sometimes, because I didn't know until like the very close to the time I was going to go on. And I think part of what made it, I don't know, successful was that I'm not all that well informed about politics. I mean, I probably am more now than I was then, because I spend a lot of hours watching that stuff. But I think I was seeing it in some ways the way the average American did, which was I was genuinely surprised by a lot of things. Here's just one small example. I was in a hallway, this must have been Houston, where they did the Republican convention that year. And I was in like this big backstage hallway, and I see this cart, this enormous cart of wooden of signs that are, stapled to the wooden stick, and it wheels by me, and I was like, people don't bring their own signs. Like, I had this idea. I mean, now it seems clear, but I had this idea that people in their enthusiasm, right? Like how people loved taking pictures of the signs at the Women's March.
Yeah.
Because the signs were performers themselves sometimes. I had this idea that everyone in their enthusiasm for the first George Bush, were, down on their hands and knees in their garage, magic markering on a cardboard thing. Or I thought everyone made their own signs. And then you get there and like, no, the signs are distributed. Oh, kind of sucks a little bit of the life out of it, I think.
I can tell you that all of in my room are a bunch of political signs, and all of the political signs are from rallies because they were for free, and so that's why I go to rallies, to get the signs and then to also watch the speaker. But what about
when you choose a different kind of decor, like when you then you're just going to give up on politics altogether? Is that correct? Because it won't matter anymore. Once you go to like doilies or something, then you won't care about politics.
Maybe, but I think politics will always stick with it. It's a political junkie at heart. But I'm wondering, so you were a political correspondent, and then that led you to host your own variety show, the Paula Poundstone Show. What was your goal in hosting that show, and how different was that hosting your show and compared to you doing stand-up? Because when you hosted your show, you didn't speak in front of a live audience, but a camera.
Oh no, I did speak in front of a live audience. They were. You're sort of in the camera's sort of in between you and the audience, though. So, well, I launched a couple of different sort of hard to describe shows. They were a little bit variety. They were a little bit talk show. They were, I don't know. They were. I did stuff where, and this is, I mean, now like you and I on Zoom can set up a camera and I can see you. In television, that was not as much of a thing back then. That wasn't as, so a lot of the technology has changed and made things a lot easier. But I did like a lot of remote stuff on my show. I had a screen up there when I challenged, at one point I challenged Carl Lewis, who was at that time the fastest man in the world. So I forget, he probably was I think he was in Texas at the time. And I challenged him to a 50-yard dash where I was standing in Santa Monica and he was in Houston. And I had a glove on top of my screen. And after he accepted the challenge, I slapped him with the glove, because that's how you make a challenge. And actually my plan, that the ABC show that I had got taken off within a couple of episodes. But my plan had been to sort of build up to this Carl Lewis race. And one of the things that I wanted to do was, whenever we saw him or whenever we see like a track and field event with people running, but certainly when we saw Carl Lewis, we saw the fastest man in the world running. But he was running in competition with the second fastest man in the world and the third fastest man in the world and so on and so forth. And therefore, we have no idea really what it looks like. So my idea was to get, a crane shot of he and I running so that people could see exactly how far away a regular person was, really what those times mean. Overall, my goal, just like any other show that I do, overall, my goal is to lift people up, to give them the dopamine hit of laughter. I also, whenever I have a show that is like, say, for example, my podcast, Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone, or the ABC show, or the HBO talk show, always I like to do stuff where there's real information being exchanged. And in a humorous way, perhaps, but that the information is real. Just because that way there, if people go away and they think, well, it wasn't all that funny, they can at least go, but I didn't know there were that many Oreos in a package.
Well, that's the perfect lead-in to questions about Wait, Don't Tell Me. because that's a show that does have real information, sort of sometimes things that if you were paying attention, you heard on the news, but kind of oddball things. And Victor is extremely well informed, but I have to say, he hadn't heard of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, something that I follow every single week and love you on. So I want to introduce his generation to that show by having you describe how you would describe Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Well, it is a news quiz show, but it's a comedy news quiz show. So there's a panel of 3 people every week, and we answer questions about things, about stories in the news. And we're competing, by the way.
Yes.
We're competing for points. I'm going to tell you something, Victor, that maybe I shouldn't. This is sort of it's a little dirt on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but there's doping.
No.
Yeah, Mo Rocca, juicer. A lot of people,
wow.
In their effort to win, people say to me all the time because, if you've never listened before, Victor, you don't know this, but I hold the record for losses on the show. And so I love having the chance to talk about it because I like to clear up a misconception, which is this. Yes, I am trying to win. A lot of people think I throw the match. I don't. I'm just not as good at it as the others. They seem to have been born into the world with knowledge of current events. And I just wasn't. I don't know if that's a disability.
So does
or
anybody
what,
get, do you get information in advance? Is
No.
it sort of like you get the answers?
No. Well, we know that it's based on the week's news.
Right,
So,
right.
We have some idea where one might seek out the answers, but we don't know what the questions are going to be. In fact, if for any reason they're running late, the host of the show is a guy named Peter Sagal, very funny, brilliant man.
Oh, he is.
If Peter and the producers are working on the show when we, the panelists, show up and they still happen to be on the stage, like doing a run through, they'll stop talking when we come in the room because they don't want to give away. They don't want anybody to know what the questions are. So yeah, not that it would really matter to me. I don't think if I didn't know it before, I'm not going to know it then. But there's a lot of Jill's right. There's a lot of news of the weird involved too. And the truth is, again, I'm kind of obsessive about watching the news now. And so most regular news questions I probably would get right, but what takes you out is the news of the weird. There's always some story of, honestly, some idiot in Florida doing something, where I've always said that if I were to go in armed with the answers, Trump, Biden, Afghanistan, COVID, and lemurs down their pants, I would probably win any given episode.
So there's one part of it that you obviously have to prepare for. You can't do it on the spot. And that's the Fool the Listener, where all 3 panelists...
Bluff the listener.
Yeah. So how much time do you get for that subject, and how do you get assigned who gets the real story and who has to make up their answer to it?
And the producer just emails us, usually the night before, or maybe even the day before. And sometimes they'll throw in this cute, funny little note, the way I see it, that says, we'd like these stories in by tonight. I find that just charming. One time I was writing it while I was on stage. Peter's like, Paula, what are you doing? I'm not quite finished with the old Bluff story. The problem with the Bluff story, so they'll send, Victor, it's a section of the show called Bluff the Listener. There'll be a story in the news that the producers find. They give that the telling of that story to one of the three panelists. I don't know how they decide. I assume it's fairly random. And then the other two of us have to write stories that fall under a similar sort of umbrella. But we are making up our stories, whereas the people reading the real story can't, they can't alter the facts in the story in any way. And then a listener who's called in has to choose which is the real story. My problem is just coming up with an idea.
Yeah.
I'm not, ideas come to me somewhat slowly. I often get good creative writing ideas for any one of the things that I do, whether it's for the podcast or for my act or for Wait, Don't Tell Me. I often get really good creative ideas while I'm walking the dogs. But here's the dirty little secret. I hate walking the dogs.
Well, it's worth it.
I have to confess, though, well, you know what I often do is I often listen to hashtag Sisters-in-Law while I walk the dog. I listen to it over and over again.
That's such an honor. Well, let's talk about your podcast now then. Because
my podcast, which is called Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone.
Which I would argue is not true. No, that isn't true.
They don't listen more than once.
Oh, they do. I'm sure they do. And but let's talk about when did you launch that, and how did you decide to go with a podcast?
I think we've been doing Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone for about 3 years, maybe just shy of 3 years. I'm not quite sure. I would have to cut off my arm and count the rings, and I'm not going to do that right now. And before that podcast, Doug Berman from who's the what do they call him, the benevolent overlord of Wait, Don't Tell Me. He had come to me and asked if I wanted to do a podcast, develop one with him. And so we were working on that. It was called Live from the Poundstone Institute, I think. And it was very expensive. So it was very hard to turn a profit. It's very hard to turn, as Jill, my guess is you're well apprised of this by now.
Yes.
It's very hard. It's very much like, it's because it's like the gold rush, They say that in the gold rush, the people who made money were the people who sold the picks and shovels. There's a lot of people podcasting. There's millions of people podcasting. And somebody like Mark Maron, who, started before anybody knew what the hell a podcast was, well, he's doing pretty good. And he'd be the first to say so, that he got in when the getting was good. We've continued. So we did that one with NPR, and we were sort of auditioning for a, quote unquote sidekick. And my friend from Wait, Don't Tell Me, Adam Felber, actually, Doug, I think, had called him up to ask him if he had any ideas of someone who could work with me in that capacity. And Adam was like, how about me? And so when we decided to wrap on Live from the Poundstone Institute, me and Adam and my manager Bonnie and another guy that was working with us, Ken Lizebnik, we decided we'd take a pass at a less expensive kind. And part of the reason it was so expensive is because we did have a live audience. We had NPR doing the sound, which, you guys know. Like,
yes.
I listened to, I listened to the Al Hunt and James Carville podcast.
Yes.
You can hear James's wife putting the dishes away behind him.
Well, you may hear my dog soon because we're getting thunder and lightning here, and he may react. But we have.
Is your dog one of those dogs that gets scared of?
No, he just wants me to know. He's very responsive to. If the landline phone rings, you will hear him howl. Otherwise, he's laying here quietly now, but. if the lightning gets bad, I may be freaking out, and that'll send a message to him. But we have the best producers, of course, both Sisters-in-Law and this, and Carvel and is produced by
they're all
Politicon.
Politicon, right?
Yes, exactly. So bravo for Politicon. They are the best. And Victor, why don't you go ahead with your next question?
Well, so in addition to your time as a comedian, you're also an author of 2 books. The first is There Is Nothing in This Book I Mean to Say, and the second is The Totally Unscientific Study of the Search for Human Happiness. I'd like to ask you about your second book because we're all, I think, searching for happiness as we recover from this pandemic. And the description of this book I found very interesting and also amusing. And I just want to read from the description. It reads, offering herself up as a human guinea pig in a series of thoroughly unscientific experiments, Poundstone tries out a different get-happy hypothesis in each chapter of her data-driven search. She gets in shape with Taekwondo, she drives fast behind the wheel of a Lamborghini, she communes with nature while camping with her daughter, and commits to getting her house organized twice. Swing dancing, meditation, volunteering. Does any of it bring her happiness? You may be laughing too hard to care. Did you find the secret to human happiness?
I kind of think I did. It's a biochemical process. I think that there are things. I always say to people, I go, look, I love a Ferris wheel. I can go up in a Ferris wheel and really enjoy it because it's cool. But when it comes back down, I get let off. There's nothing. There's no. It's not an aquifer, it didn't store anything up. Mm-hmm. But there are things that you can do, specifically exercise. I wish it wasn't. I really wish it wasn't. I wish it was sitting in a chair eating Doritos. But when I wrote my book, the Get Fit experiment was actually the first one that I did. And I had to write everything in chronological order. I couldn't, change it up and lie and say, well, I did it at this point in the book or that point in the book, because the book is also a memoir. So I've written 2 memoirs now, and you get to keep writing memoirs so long as you're alive. That's one of the things. But so what I used, because every chapter is written as an experiment with the hypothesis and the conditions and the qualitative and quantitative observations and field notes, etc. But what I used as the conditions so that people could see where this happiness would play out was just whatever was going on in my family's life, my life, but in the life of taking care of my children during that stretch of time. And so I couldn't change it around and go like, oh no, he wasn't 4, he was 12. And if I had if I had it to do again, I think I would put the fitness chapter towards the end because, ta-da, found it. It's not all there is to it, or there wouldn't be so many unhappy tennis players, but it's remarkable. But also the other thing about that is I'm not happy while I'm exercising. I'm miserable while I'm exercising. But I find that I feel uplifted in the wake of it. Same thing with with getting organized. Oh my God, that was the dramatic climax of the book. I went into such a tailspin from trying to get organized because you're going through like your stuff, and there's such a psychological connection to all of it. And of course, we don't need 3/4 of what most of us have. And I don't know. So, well, yeah, I know. My answer is but it is a biochemical process, happiness.
Well, I know Jill has a few more questions, but I do want to urge our audience to follow you on Twitter because you post your exercise routine every night, and if I recall correctly, it's a combination of like jumping jacks, push-ups, squats, and plank, or some combination of those. So
yeah,
if you want to if you want to stay updated on what Paula does every night, I highly recommend following her on Twitter.
and it's something I cannot replicate for sure, because your push-ups especially are just really a lot. But I want to ask you about,
But the whole point of it was, I mean, I started doing that workout during the stay-at-home order. But the whole point was I just wanted to be able to do real push-ups. And so I started with just 10 push-ups on my knees twice a day with this commitment that I would add one on each week. And people write to me all the time because I do post it. I post it because if I didn't, I wouldn't do it. I'm only doing it because I told everyone I was going to. And I would feel terrible if I didn't do what I said I was going to do. So that, by the way, is a helpful way to get yourself doing what you're supposed to be doing. But the whole point of it, because people write to me all the time and they go like, "Oh, am I too late? And I'm like, no, start wherever. Just start small and build, and then be consistent about doing it." It's sort of a metaphor for everything, is it not?
It is. That's great advice. But I want to ask you about the involvement you have with libraries, because it's a passion that I share with you. I mean, I can remember going to my neighborhood library on North Broadway in Chicago and being introduced to a world beyond my world and loving it. And you're the national spokesperson for the American Library Association. So can you just talk a little bit about why you love libraries and what people should know?
Well, what's not to love about a library? It's got everything's in there. All the information, everything we need to know is in there somewhere. I have been, mostly what I do, honestly, is I go entertain the librarians. I do all their, what do they call ALA? American Library Association events. I go and entertain, and I also have a lot of totes, tremendous amount of library totes. So if anybody needs that, let me know. I remember years ago, I mean, libraries are not all the same. The different libraries have different programs. They tend to be very responsive to the community's needs. And they've gotten, here's an example. Years ago, they were rebuilding our main library here in Santa Monica. And so they moved all the children's books to, a branch that's a little bit harder to get to for us than the main library. And so we had to keep going to that branch to get the children's books. And one day, and it was small. And so one day, me and my kids were just hanging out there, and we were looking for books to take home. And my daughter Tosha and I had picked up a book, and we sat down at a table, and there's a bunch of tables kind of crammed together in this area because they were doing construction on the main library, and all the branches, things got smushed. So we're sitting at this table looking at a book, and both of us become aware that there's these two adults sitting at a table, near us. And we realized one of the adults was teaching the other adult to read. And, we didn't want to stare or make them feel self-conscious. So we kind of kept to what we were doing. And then we finished up and went and got the other two kids. And we, went to the car. And I was saying to them on the way home, I mean, like I had, I had horripilations from this, which is when your arm hairs stand up. It made my hair stand on end. Just hearing this exchange between these two people. And I said to my kids, I said, when you volunteer or when you donate, you always kind of wonder, well, okay, it's not that I'm not happy to do this, but you always wonder, is it having an impact? Does it make any difference? And I'll tell you something, those two courageous people, what they were doing at that table in that library will continue to have a positive impact, like a ripple, for a long, long time. And I know now they finished the main branch years ago, and now they have homework rooms, that are with a door to them, and the table is in there. And I'm sure that if they still have a volunteer adult literacy program, that they're using the privacy of those little homework rooms. But what a thing. And at one point, I remember talking to a children's librarian who was telling me that they were going to start a ukulele club. And my point is just that, they have their finger on the pulse of the community, and they do stuff that makes it a better place to be.
That's the perfect place for us to end, because it shows that you are not just funny and witty, but you are also inspirational and contributing a lot. So we thank you very much for being with us today. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. Jill and Victor, it's really been fun talking with you.
Thank you, Paula.
Take care, you guys. Stay safe.
Thank you. So, Victor, I thought that was a great conversation with Paula, and I would look forward to talking to her more. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. I think she's a natural comedian, and she makes us all laugh during these difficult times. But right before we were recording this, we were talking about what concerns us given the influx of news that happened last week and this week. And I'm wondering what concerns you most heading into the midterm elections, and what's on your mind this week.
Oh, there are so many things to really worry about. Of course, the midterm elections worry me, and the possibility that the Republicans could take control again is very scary. I'd say the couple of things that are most important to me right now are voting rights and what's happening at the state level, and why the Democrats need to start paying attention to electing Democratic legislatures and Democratic state houses. That would be very high on my list. And what about you, Victor? What's number one on your list?
You stole it right from me. I was going to say electing state legislatures on the local and the state level. I think it's easy to pay attention to national politics or kind of get a little bit cynical about what's happening on the national level. But I think what's happening in Texas and elsewhere just demonstrates the importance of local state politics. And of course, don't forget the national politics, but also not forgetting the state and local levels, because those are directly connected to your lives. And I think, voter turnout has historically been low for those levels, but hopefully in 2022, we can look at what's happening in these states and communities regarding, critical race theory, these school boards, and think, we all have a voice, and it can sometimes be heard most directly on that local state level. So I think that's what concerns me, that people won't turn out for those levels and they'll just kind of vote for, representatives and senators. But I just really hope that Democrats will push for people to vote on the local and state level.
And you mentioned the school board. That's becoming a very important job for the local communities. And I hope there will be enough candidates from the Democratic Party for those positions, because otherwise education could be severely damaged. But I was interested that you agreed with me on voting rights, because this is supposed to be an intergenerational perspective, and we're supposed to have different perspectives, but so often we don't, and I find that wonderful and terrific. Even if you didn't know what Wait, Don't Tell Me was and weren't a regular fan of it, there's an intergenerational difference, and I'm hoping that this show introduced our audience to that wonderful weekly show. Victor, the second thing that's really bothering me, aside from who's going to win the 2022 elections and voting rights, is the concerns of so many Democrats about what's happening at the Department of Justice, about why former President Trump, hasn't been indicted yet. And I'm running out of excuses. I have refrained from in any way criticizing the Attorney General, because I think he needs to be given time. It takes a long time to build good cases. But even I am getting a little concerned about there being no indictments, about there not being any action except saying that they would bring a case under the federal access to clinics, which is simply saying you can't be violent at the entrance to a clinic, as opposed to saying they were going to bring a case to protect the civil rights and the constitutional rights of anyone who could become pregnant and who might need help. So I am equally worried about that, and there not having been any action on taking away the filibuster so that we could get voting rights and protect a woman's or anyone's right with a uterus. So those are concerning me as well.
Definitely. I just have one question, maybe just for our audience. I know we've talked a lot about Bill Barr on this podcast, and I'm wondering just for you, like, Merrick Garland obviously wants to protect DOJ as an institution, but do you think he's doing that at the expense of taking more drastic measures on things like voting rights and being more aggressive and maybe prosecuting the insurrectionists and Donald Trump?
As a former person at the Department of Justice who loves the Department of Justice and who realizes how long it takes to build a case, I'm giving Merrick Garland the opportunity to show us that his words have meaning and that there will be actions following it. There are some that require immediate action. And so I'm hoping that soon there will be. There are some cases like, the obstruction of justice pointed out in the Mueller case about the campaign violations that Michael Cohen went to jail for, and which he said he did at the direction of and for the benefit of individual number one, who is clearly the former president. So I think there are some things that are just hanging there that I think need attention right away. There are others that will take time. And I do believe that Merrick Garland was the right person to restore credibility, and that at some point, if he's being politically careful, it will not be doing justice for all America, and that action will be required.
Thank you for listening to this episode of iGen Politics with Paula Poundstone. We hope it made you laugh a little bit despite the news of the day, and that you'll tune in next Wednesday for a brand new episode of iGen Politics, and follow us wherever you follow your podcasts.